Right then, all welcome to the Football Fan Zone. What a day! What a day in the Formula One racing world. Oh, we've got an echo. Let's turn that down. There we go. I hope everyone's doing well and keeping safe and COVID free and whatnot. Right, firstly, we're going to have a little look at what's going on So obviously we had the race today, the Formula One race. In Abu Dhabi, the winner being Max Verstappen, who, as a result of winning the Grand Prix, also won the world title, but it didn't come without controversy. And we'll have a look at those shortly. But just a quick reminder, if you are new here, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to click that like button. Let's get on with it. Now, presumably, if you're watching this channel, you know about Formula One. You've been watching Formula One, or at least you have some relative understanding. So, just a bit of context for those who don't know, and they probably, like I said, if you are watching, you probably will know. And without going into too much detail, what essentially today was the final race of the 2021 Formula One season. Both Hamilton and Verstappen were going into the race level on points. And what was being decided was being called or dubbed a decider in the desert, where the leading driver of the two at the end of the race would be crowned the Formula One champion. Verstappen had qualified on pole position from yesterday. However, after a bad start by Verstappen, Hamilton led the race on the first corner and essentially led it for 57 of the 58 laps in terms of net position. There was a moment where Perez was in front of him, but only by default because Perez hadn't pitted and Hamilton had, and that lasted for about a lap. So, but where the controversy came was towards the end of the race. With a few laps to go, there was an incident where Nicholas Latifi and the Williams had crashed the car. That crash prompted the call of a safety car. A safety car was deployed, and this essentially led from what was a 12-second gap between Hamilton and Verstappen. And of course, with all the other things, once the safety car comes out, it brings all the cars together. So they're in a nice, sort of neat order. And the reason why they do this is to slow all the cars right down, bring them all together so you have big gaps around. Once the group of cars go past, you have a big gap so that stewards can do things like remove the debris off the track, or in this case, remove Nicholas Latifi's car out of harm's way. And then normally there are procedures where a safety car would then be called in. Once safety car is called in, the lead driver, in this case Hamilton, would then dictate on the last couple of bends, once the first safety car has gone in, when that race will resume. So he can control it ease pace. As most do, slow right down, they get around that last bend and then they sort of floor it. And that's your typical racing start after or from a safety car. Now, the reason why there's controversy on this, because when there's a safety car deployed, you essentially get a free or a very cheap pit stop. Now, the problem here was Verstappen was able to pit and not lose any places, essentially. He was able to pit, and it wouldn't make any difference if he pitted because he couldn't possibly lose second place. Yet he was always, because of a safety car, he was always going to be able to come back up and join right behind Hamilton, and who would have so therefore he had a brand new set of soft tyres, whereas Hamilton was racing on 44-lap old harder tyres, and who couldn't pit because if he did, he would have come out behind Verstappen. I hope that makes sort of sense there. But so because of it, Hamilton, the right thing to do was stay out. Verstappen he's got nothing to lose, might as well pit, and he pitted and so on. And as a result of the safety car conditions, Verstappen was able to close right up behind Hamilton. So that lead that Hamilton had over Verstappen was basically wiped out. This then led to some controversy in terms of the restart under the safety car. Now, what happened, there was confusion because between Hamilton and Verstappen, there were 4 or 5 lapped cars that Lewis had lapped. And prior to the safety car were cars between Verstappen and Lewis. And like I said, it was a 12-second gap and 4 lapped cars. Now, Verstappen, with a few laps to go, needed to get past those safety cars to catch up with Hamilton, to overtake him and so on, when Hamilton was actually the faster driver. So, in other words, without the incident, Hamilton was going to win the World Championship. It was virtually a foregone at that point, barring something miraculous like this, or of course an engine failure or some sort of reliability issue with Hamilton's car. And so what essentially had happened at this stage here, the safety car was there. They had decided that the lap cars between Hamilton and Verstappen, the race director Michael Masi had made the decision, said the lapped cars. Now, normally lapped cars, it's down to discretion, but the FIA race director can allow lapped cars that have been lapped to basically unlap themselves. They can go past the safety car, drive all around, join the back of the queue, if you like. And then, but he decided to start with, no, I'm not gonna allow that. There's not enough time in the race to allow that, because if he'd done that, they would need to get rounds and so on and so forth. And decided actually the best thing is just to restart the race as soon as possible in the current conditions, because it'd be the quickest way. But the only reasonable way in which they can get the race restarted without the race finishing, because we were, like I said, we're only 2 or 3 laps from the end at this point. And then a decision was made very late on for the lapped cars to actually unlap themselves. So he changed his mind to unlap. He said, actually, you know what? I will allow cars to unlap themselves. But what he done was only allow the cars between Hamilton and Verstappen. So that way that there would be he was obviously trying to position things so that it was a straight fight between Hamilton and Verstappen into the last lap. And that essentially happened. And then on the last lap, Verstappen with a brand new set of tyres, Hamilton with very old tyres. It was basically like a shootout between a man with an AK-47 and then another one with a BB gun. It's a completely unfair and unrealistic fight. Mercedes lodged an appeal against the result and said they shouldn't stand because the regulations, which we'll come into in a second. In fact, we'll just bring them up now. I'm just going to bring this up right here. Right, so these are the regulations as they are. 48.12. If the clerk of the course considers it safe to do so, the clerk being the FIA race director, which is Michael Masi, and the message lapped cars may now overtake has been sent to all competitors via the official messaging system. Note the words there, all competitors. Now, as we've already established, not every car got that. Not every lapped car got that. Only the ones between Hamilton and Verstappen. Any cars that have been lapped by the leader will be required to pass the cars on the lead lap and the safety car. So this will only apply to cars that were lapped at the time they crossed the line at the end of the lap, during which they crossed the first safety line for the second time after the safety car was deployed. Having overtaken the cars from the lead lap and the safety car, these cars should then proceed around the track in an appropriate speed without overtaking, as I said. So they get an opportunity to drive at normal speed and try and join the back of the queue as quickly as they can, really, without overtaking each other while they're doing so. Whilst they're overtaking, and in order to ensure this is carried out safely, the cars on the lead lap must always stay on the racing line, and unless deviating from it is unavoidable. So that is, let's say you've got a bunch of cars that are not being lapped, but they've got lapped cars behind them that need to come past. They're saying, look, if you're a car that's not lapped, to not come off that racing line, because there may be cars that need to quickly get past safety car and drive back round. Unless the clerk of the course considers the presence of a safety car is still necessary, once the last lapped car has passed the leader, the safety car will turn to the pits at the end of the following lap. So not that lap, but the following lap. So in this particular case, lap 57 of 58, the decision was made to allow cars to come past the lapped cars, the ones we said about that weren't all of them, which should have been, but the cars between Hamilton and Verstappen to unlap themselves, and they went past. And then it should be then at that point should be when it should be the following lap. That's what's put in the rules here. And let's consider the presence of safety car is necessary. Once the lapped cars have passed the lead, the safety car will return to the pits at the end of the following lap. Well, that didn't happen because the safety car coming that lap rather than the following one. If the clerk of the course considers track conditions are unsuitable for overtaking, the message overtaking will not be permitted, will be sent to all competitors via the official messaging system. That actually didn't happen because they were quite happy for the racing conditions were good. We got a message here. Supermax or loose. We're just going through the rules, mate. You can call it all loose, so you can say whatever you want. We're just simply reading the rules as they are there. If you're quite happy with races to win against FIA rules, then you're more than welcome to feel that way. We are just simply going through what are the rules in the race. And Michael Masi, as we're coming across, has not followed the rules as the race director. And I do believe he will have to resign by the time this is all done. So there we go. So there's two clear points here. There's two clear points, which is firstly the message for all cars to be it has been sent to all competitors via the official messaging system. We know that wasn't the case, and the reason why we know that wasn't the case, quite simply, is because lapped cars that weren't given the opportunity to overtake said, "I never got the message to overtake." We know the only people that got the message to overtake were the ones between Hamilton and Verstappen. That quite clearly says, the rule states there, that lapped cars may be overtaken has to be sent to all competitors. There is no grey area. It's there via the messaging system. So that is because of that, and then of course, like I said, and then the following lap. So okay, it should have been, if you want the race to restart, it should have then given all lapped cars the opportunity to unlap themselves essentially, and then the safety car should have come in the following lap. The car didn't come in the following lap; it came in on the same lap. Now, the FIA or the race, this was obviously appealed to the racing stewards. The racing stewards reviewed, and they decided that they wasn't going to take any further action. We'll look at what they said. I'll just bring it up here. Bear with me 2 seconds. I thought I had it here. Let's bring this up 1 second. So it was quite it was controversial. Here we go. Right, let's just bring this up here. I'll share the screen with you here. Bear with me 2 seconds. Right. So there we go. Mind the shoe ads at the bottom. But so this was the verdict of the race stewards after the race once Mercedes had lodged their appeal, which obviously was in their right to do so. It argued, so Mercedes claimed that there have been two breaches of sport regulations, 48.12, namely which states any car that's been lapped by the leader will require past cars on the lead lap and safety car. And once the last car has passed, the leader of safety car will return to the pits and end the following lap. Mercedes argued this being complied with car 44 would have won the race. They therefore requested the stewards amend the classification under Article 11.9.3H of the FIA International Sport and Code. Red Bull's argument, obviously with their defence, was that any doesn't mean all, and Article 48.13 of Sport and Regulation states that the message safety car in this lap is the signal that will enter the pit lane at the end of that lap. That therefore Article 48.13 overrides 48.12, and that Article 15.3 gives the race director overriding authority over the use of the safety car, and that all cars have been lapped 8 in total, of which 5 were allowed to overtake the safety car. It would not have changed the outcome of the race. Well, that's I'm afraid it's bull, and the reason that's bull, quite simply, is because bull was because if that was to happen, the safety car would not have been able to come in that lap, and therefore would have had to have done another lap, and therefore the race would have finished under the safety car, and therefore its current classification, because you can't overtake a safety car. So that is quite simply bull. 15.3 gives the race director over one thought. Well, we'll come to that in a minute. So the race director gave evidence stating that 48.12 was to remove those lapped cars that would interfere in the racing between the leaders. Well, unfortunately and this is why I think Michael Masi, this will be his last race as FIA director. So look, sorry. Well, the FIA fucked both Red Bull and Merck over the whole season. The FIA, it's just to be clear, the FIA is the race director, Michael Masi, who's obviously a representative of the FIA, but he's essentially the race referee, and he's supposed to referee in accordance with the regulations. What I believe has happened here is I believe he's not refereed in accordance with regulations, and I believe he has simply made up the regulations as he sees fit, which he is not the God Almighty. He is not the rule maker. And I think that's where ultimately I still think Mercedes could win their appeal. Conclusion to the stewards. The stewards consider that the protest is admissible, having considered various statements made by parties, and should determine the following: that Article 15.3 allows the race director to control the use of the safety car, which in our determination includes the deployment and withdrawal. But that's, see, this thing, yes, it gives him the right to deploy and to withdraw it in line with regulations 14.12 and 48.12 and 48.13, in line, not this overrides, and actually he can deploy it as and when he wants, and nilly-willy and so on. That's not the term of the law. There is that if a safety car is needed, he is the man to call it. That is it. Anything else is just completely irrelevant. That although 48.12 may have not been fully applied, so they accept it's not been fully applied fully, in relation to the safety car returning to the pits at the end of the following lap, Article 48.13 overrides that once a measured safety car in this lap has been displayed, it is mandatory to withdraw the safety car at the end of that lap. That notwithstanding, Mercedes requests that the stewards remediate the matter by amending the classification to reflect position at the end of the penultimate lap. This is a step that the stewards believe is effectively shortening the race retrospectively and hence not appropriate. Now, this last bit here, I think, is completely pointless by the stewards. And it's why stewards they're not legally trained. They're not lawyer stewards. And this is why I think this will be, we know Mercedes is appealing this to the FIA. This isn't obviously the end of it. And the reason why this is in here, this is if this was being done by legal people, this isn't on there. It's basically saying, look, even if the rules were broken, we couldn't affect it because it would have shortened the race by a lap anyway, and so on. And that's not the point. That's an irrelevant point. It's neither here nor there. 15.3 again does not give them the use to override 48.12 and 48.13. And 48.13 is relevant when they're saying about, once he's joined, once he said that the safety car can come in this lap, they can't change their mind. Well, if you're saying that he can't change his mind there, but he did change his mind about allowing lapped cars to overtake on that same lap, so you can't apply it to one section and not another. And I think that's what Mercedes will argue as well. I also think if we go back to the original rules, let's just bring up the original rulings here, or the 48.12 rule, which is, let's just bring them up here. Going back to the original rules, in terms of the following lap, what the FIA basically saying is that he's 15.3 gives him total, complete power on how the race is conducted with a safety car. It doesn't. It's not what its intention or it's intended for. 15.3 is the article that allows the race director to determine when a safety car can and can't be deployed based on the regulations of 48.12 and 48.13. It's not, otherwise he could just deploy it whenever he wants. Oh yeah, that person's just overtaken that person. Right, I don't like that. I don't like that person. I'm going to deploy the safety car. That will fuck them all up a little bit. That's the sort of thing. It's specifically designed to prevent that from happening. That is why it's a complete non-starter. I don't think, and that is exactly why this will be fought by lawyers rather than by race stewards. The race stewards are simply not legally qualified to make such big decisions. And I think ultimately what the FIA are doing here, or what the race stewards are doing, which is, look, we don't want to strip Verstappen off the title. We don't want that responsibility. So Mercedes, you've got the right to appeal it away from the race stewards. We suggest you do that. And that way, if it goes to the court, well, it could end up in the court of abbreviated sport, but either way, if the decision is then to overturn later down the line, the FIA and the race stewards can say, "Oh, look, Red Bull, it wasn't us. Don't blame us. It wasn't us. It was the judges made that decision." And I think that's what they're trying to do here. So they don't want to take responsibility. I've got a comment here, but can they really take the win away from Max? He deserves it so much. Lewis would deserve it. So this is the problem. But this is my point with Michael Masi, why I think he has to go, because he has just single-handedly brought the entire sport into disrepute. His position, in my opinion, becomes untenable. completely untenable because you can't. And yes, it's hard to take it is. I understand it's hard to take the result away from Max, but the fact is had the rules had been followed to their intended purpose, that race would have never restarted on the last lap. It would have finished under a safety car. If you want to see racing, if Michael Masi genuinely wanted to provide a race, when that safety car first was deployed, what he could have done was red flag it. He could have red flagged, all the cars could have come in, and then they could have gone out on new tyres, etc. It would have been on a level playing field on a standing start with 3 or 4 laps to go. That would have been the fair way to have done things. However, he didn't. He took the law into his own hands and he manipulated the rules as he saw fit. And I think, look, what we do know is he made a decision. He said, look, no, that he's not going to allow lapped cars to unlap themselves and then change his mind. But we know what happened between. Well, Christian Horner got straight onto the blower to the FIA, and his words, Christian Horner's words, I was shouting down the radio. And so if anything happens for next year, if there's any regulation change I want to see for next year, and this isn't just a Red Bull thing, I think this whole badgering of race officials needs to stop. Whether it be Mercedes, whether it be Red Bull, we know Red Bull have been very vocal on it themselves recently, but I'm sure it happens across the board. Is that race officials shouldn't be badgered by team bosses, in my opinion. We know Christian Horner has already been summoned after, I think it was after Qatar, where he was outspoken and he got called to the stewards and told basically to for it to not happen again. I don't like seeing that. I don't like seeing a team principal getting on a thing, shouting, in his words, shouting down the radio. And after he's finished shouting, the race director suddenly changed his mind. So for me, it doesn't. The whole thing doesn't sit well. And again, Michael Masi has single-handedly just brought the whole sport into disrepute. His position is now untenable, in my opinion. Michael Masi has to go. I can't see how he can survive. It's just not. It's not fair. It's not feasible what's happened today. It's not fair on Hamilton. It's not fair on Verstappen. If we're being completely honest, it's not fair on anyone. And now this will go to Mercedes have appealed. This will go all the way now to probably to CAS, to the Court of Abbreviation of Sport. The appeal, I think the first appeal will go to the FIA directly. The FIA, bear in mind, like I said already, the stewards aren't legally trained. The appeal that will be heard before, I think it'll be before Thursday, will be heard with lawyers in mind. So the FIA, the appeals panel won't be lawyers, but they'll be taking their advice from lawyers. And those lawyers will be basing on what is likely to happen if they went to CAS. I don't think I still think there's a good chance that if I'm Mercedes, all hope's not lost. If I'm Mercedes, if I'm Red Bull, you want to celebrate, but you don't want to over celebrate. This could still get overturned. I think it could still get overturned. There should be a team captain who can only talk to the FIA, take a shout to this. But yes, that's what I was just saying. I think if one rule has got to come in, it should. And this isn't just against one team. All teams. I don't even think there should be a team captain who's allowed to speak to the race director. I don't think the race director should. I don't think the race director should be put in the position where he's got people, shouting one way or another and so on. And certainly, like I said, we've seen Christian Horner's own words where he shouted down the radio. I just don't think that either, and it's not just because don't forget, we only hear and see those with Mercedes and Red Bull. You have to remember there are 8 other teams and 16 other drivers racing, and they're also racing their own battles, and Michael Masi has to deal with those as well. But definitely, I agree that it's not just Red Bull, but there needs to be a rule put in place to prevent teams from race, from team principals applying pressure, unnecessary pressure. Michael Masi's job is hard enough as it is, I accept. However, he is quite clearly really badly handled, and he's basically made what was supposed to be a real spectacle of a race into one of the most controversial races probably in the history of the sport. Single-handedly brought the sports to its knees. The FIA have got to. Well, I like I said, I just can't see how he could. How can you survive that? How can he possibly survive, Michael Masi? So again, well, and this isn't about. And just to clarify, I'm not a Lewis Hamilton love boy. You know, I think Lewis Hamilton personally. I think he's an arrogant little s word, if you like. I'll say it, an arrogant little shite. I think he's an arrogant little shite. I think he's completely forgotten his roots of where he's come from. The whole when he first came to the scene, everyone liked Hamilton because of his roots. Young boy from Stevenage, working class family. Dad works several jobs in order to pay for the go-karting and so on. And that was that humbleness that people liked about him. And over the years, Hamilton's become quite this, you know, moving to Monaco, avoiding taxes. We've seen him in the Panama Papers. And what really got me with Hamilton is when he sat there on an interview. It was in Monaco, driving the streets of Monaco with on Sky Sports. And saying about, oh yeah, but you know, I've got my bills to pay for too. And I sort of think, yeah, but Lewis, your £25 million a year, I think covers it. I think your £25 million a year covers your bills, and yet you still feel the need to buy private jets using offshore accounts in order to avoid paying taxes. But that's not, you know. So I think Hamilton's an arrogant twat. However, that doesn't mean I can't admire him as a sports person and as a racing driver. And what's happened today has robbed Hamilton of what was a clear victory. And the rules that Michael Masi has applied to the race in that last lap was unsporting and completely out of line with the intention of the rules. That is my view. So I'd like to know what you guys think. I know there's been a lot of mixed. Certainly on Twitter, a lot of stuff I've read on Twitter has been very mixed with what's going on. Some will say it's it's tough on Verstappen. It is. I'm not saying if Verstappen gets stripped of the world title, I'm not saying that wouldn't be hard and it wouldn't be tough. I'm just simply saying it wouldn't necessarily be. It wouldn't necessarily be without merit, and it wouldn't necessarily be completely unfair, because the reality is that if the rules were applied to their intended purposes, Verstappen would not be world champion today. And actually, I think Michael Masi, apart from by the time this is all done, not only do I think he owes Hamilton and Mercedes apology, he owes Verstappen and Red Bull, because he's given Verstappen a title which he may not keep. And I genuinely mean that. He may not keep that title. I think this will go down to the wire. And just again, if we bring up the regulations here, and again, just to reiterate with the regulations,